There is a particular ache that comes from watching life move forward while feeling suspended in place, not stuck exactly, just out of sync, as if everyone else received a schedule you somehow missed. People who feel behind in life often function well on the surface. They work, they plan, they smile at milestones that are not their own. But beneath that composure lives a quiet urgency, a sense that time is slipping faster for others than it is for them. This feeling is not about laziness or failure. It is about comparison, expectation, and invisible timelines that quietly shape self-worth. It is the weight of imagined deadlines, the pressure of should have, the fear that life is happening somewhere else. To understand this feeling, one must look not at progress, but at perception. The feeling of being behind rarely announces itself loudly. It arrives quietly through observation, through moments that seem harmless at first. A photograph appears, an engagement, a promotion, a moving box stacked neatly by a front door that is not yours. Nothing is said out loud, no one points, no one accuses, yet something tightens inside. People who feel behind in life often do not measure themselves against strangers. They compare themselves to peers, to classmates, to siblings, to versions of themselves they once imagined becoming by now. The comparison is rarely intentional. It happens automatically, woven into daily life. Each milestone becomes a mirror, each success a quiet question, why not me yet? What makes this comparison particularly heavy is that it feels moral. Progress is not just about movement, it becomes proof of worth. Falling behind begins to feel like failing, even when no rulebook ever existed. The world reinforces this silently. Ages are attached to achievements. Careers have timelines. Relationships have seasons that seem to follow a script. By a certain age, something should be done. By another, something else should be secured. And when life does not follow this sequence, the mind searches for explanation. Often it finds blame. People who feel behind are rarely idle. They are thinking, reflecting, trying to choose carefully. But thoughtfulness does not photograph well. Inner work does not show up as milestones. Growth that happens internally is invisible in a culture that values visible progress. So the comparison deepens. The person begins to track time differently. Years feel shorter, days feel heavier. There is a constant sense of needing to catch up, even without knowing exactly to what. This urgency creates tension. Rest feels undeserved. Enjoyment feels premature. There is always something that should have been done already. What is rarely acknowledged is how much this feeling distorts perception. The mind selectively notices evidence that confirms the belief of being behind. Successes are minimized, delays are magnified. Someone else's highlight becomes proof of personal inadequacy. Another's certainty becomes evidence of one's own confusion. But certainty is often performative, and timelines are often inherited, not chosen. Still, the emotional impact remains. People who feel behind often carry a quiet shame. Not dramatic, not visible, but persistent. It whispers during conversations. It shapes how they introduce themselves. It influences what they share and what they hide. They may downplay their life, over-explain their choices, justify their pace before anyone asks. This is the loneliness of silent comparison. Being surrounded by people while feeling out of step with them. Being present while internally lagging behind an imagined version of life. The hardest part is that the comparison feels reasonable, logical. After all, others appear to be moving forward. But appearances flatten complexity. They compress years of doubt, failure, and uncertainty into a single image or sentence. What is seen is not the full story, yet the nervous system reacts as if it is. This chapter is about recognizing that reaction, not correcting it, not silencing it, but seeing it clearly. Because feeling behind is not a reflection of actual progress. It is a response to perceived distance between where one is and where one believes they should be. And until that belief is examined, the comparison will continue quietly, persistently, shaping self-worth without ever being questioned. The story does not begin with falling behind. It begins with measuring life against a timeline that was never fully chosen. No one wakes up one day and invents the idea of being behind. The feeling is inherited, absorbed slowly from the world, long before it is consciously questioned. Timelines are taught early. They arrive disguised as structure. School grades, age-based expectations, clear markers of success that move in a straight line. First this, then that, and if something is delayed, it is labeled as a problem to fix. Children learn quickly that time is not neutral. It carries judgment. A child who learns faster is praised. One who moves slower is corrected. Even curiosity becomes conditional, only valued when it aligns with the expected pace. By adolescence, the timeline becomes more social. Who is chodist? Who is already certain? Milestones turn into measures of belonging. To be on time is to be acceptable. To lag is to risk exclusion. Families reinforce this, often unintentionally. Questions are asked with concern that hides pressure. Plans are discussed as if there is one correct sequence. What are you going to do next? When will you settle down? Have you figured it out yet? These questions do not come from malice. They come from fear, the fear that deviation equals danger. Culture amplifies this fear. Success stories are compressed into neat arcs. Failures are edited out. Late bloomers are celebrated only after they succeed. Social media accelerates the distortion. Life appears as a feed of milestones one after another, without pause. Comparison becomes constant, unavoidable. The mind begins to track progress visually rather than experientially. What can be seen feels real. What is internal feels insufficient. Over time, these external timelines become internalized. They move from expectation to identity. The person no longer feels late to an event, they feel late to life. This is where shame enters. Not loud shame, but quiet ambient shame. The kind that hums beneath daily decision. The kind that makes rest feel irresponsible and joy feel unearned. People who feel behind often blame themselves for not moving faster, without questioning whether the pace was ever aligned with their nature. They forget that not all paths are linear. That exploration often looks like delay from the outside. Some timelines are inherited from survival. In families where stability was fragile, progress had to be fast. There was no room for uncertainty. Choosing wrong felt dangerous. Others inherit timelines from comparison-based environments, places where ranking mattered more than understanding, where worth was measured, not felt. In all cases, the message is similar: time is scarce, mistakes are costly, falling behind is irreversible. But this message is incomplete. Human development does not move in straight lines. Identity unfolds unevenly. Some people move quickly early, then plateau, others wander, then deepen. Yet the internalized timeline rarely accounts for this complexity. It demands visible momentum, regardless of internal readiness. This creates a split. The person feels pressured to move forward while unsure of direction. They rush decisions or freeze entirely. Both reactions reinforce the belief of being behind. Understanding where timelines come from does not erase their emotional power, but it introduces distance. It reveals that the urgency is learned, that the shame is inherited, that the sense of lateness is not proof of failure, but evidence of conditioning. This chapter is about seeing the invisible structure shaping the feeling, because only when the timeline is seen can it begin to loosen its grip, and only then can progress be defined from the inside, rather than imposed from the outside. Feeling behind in life is not a direct reflection of reality. It is a psychological experience constructed, reinforced, and maintained by the way the mind processes time, identity, and comparison. At the center of this experience is social comparison theory. Humans understand themselves in relation to others. Progress, success, and belonging are often evaluated not in isolation, but contextually. When someone perceives that peers are advancing faster, career, relationships, stability, the brain interprets this as a threat. Not a physical one, but a social one. A threat to status, to belonging, to future security. The nervous system responds accordingly. Anxiety increases, attention narrows. The mind begins scanning for evidence of inadequacy. This process happens automatically. The brain is not asking whether the comparison is fair. It is asking whether the self is at risk of being left behind. Another factor is time perception. Psychologically, time speeds up when uncertainty is present. When goals feel unclear, the future feels closer and more urgent. This creates the sensation that life is moving faster than one can keep up with. Ironically, those who feel behind often spend more time reflecting, questioning, and evaluating their choices. This depth slows visible progress but deepens internal processing, yet the culture rarely rewards this kind of development. So the mind mislabels thoughtfulness as delay. Identity formation also plays a role. Developmental psychology shows that adulthood is not a single stage, but a series of identity revisions. Some people commit early, others explore longer. Exploration, however, is often misinterpreted as stagnation, especially in environments that prize early certainty. The brain seeks coherence. It wants a clear narrative. Who am I? Where am I going? Am I on track? When these answers are unresolved, discomfort arises. The mind fills the gap with judgment. Another psychological mechanism at work is counterfactual thinking, the tendency to imagine alternative timelines. If only I had chosen differently. If only I had started sooner. If only I hadn't wasted time. These imagined versions feel vivid. They create emotional regret without acknowledging the information and limitations that existed at the time. Memory itself is distorted by the present feeling of lateness. Past decisions are reinterpreted through current anxiety rather than understood in their original context. There is also the role of cultural acceleration. Modern life compresses expectations. Careers that once took decades now seem to demand immediate clarity. Relationships are measured against curated images of stability and happiness. The brain is exposed to far more comparative data than it evolved to handle. What once came from a small social group now comes from hundreds daily. This overload intensifies perceived lag. Importantly, none of this means the feeling is imaginary. The emotional experience is real, but its source is psychological construction, not objective failure. People who feel behind often underestimate their adaptability. They equate current position with final outcome. The brain under stress struggles to imagine nonlinear growth. Stress narrows time horizons. It convinces the mind that windows are closing even when they are not. This is why reassurance rarely works. The feeling is not based on logic alone. It is rooted in nervous system activation. Understanding the psychology of perceived lag introduces compassion. It reframes the experience as a response to pressure, not proof of inadequacy. The mind is reacting to comparison, time distortion, and unresolved identity, not issuing a verdict on worth. This chapter matters because it separates feeling from fact. It shows that being behind is not a diagnosis. It is a state of perception shaped by fear culture, and the brain's need for certainty. And perception, unlike time itself, can shift. When someone feels behind in life, the emotion rarely exists alone. It travels with companions, anxiety that hums beneath the surface, shame that stays unnamed, and urgency that never quite rests. Anxiety is often the loudest. It creates a constant sense of pressure, even in moments meant for ease. Time feels tight, choices feel heavy. The future presses in, demanding clarity that does not yet exist. This anxiety is not about any single decision. It is about the fear of irreversible loss, the fear that opportunities expire, that certain doors close permanently if they are not entered on time. The mind begins to frame life as a narrowing corridor. Every delay feels dangerous. Every pause feels like falling further behind. Shame settles quietly beneath this anxiety. It is not always conscious. It does not shout accusations. It whispers comparisons. Others have figured this out. Something must be wrong. I should be further by now. Shame turns uncertainty into a personal flaw. It convinces the person that their pace reflects their value. That hesitation means incompetence. That exploration means failure. This internal dialogue creates resistance. Not resistance to progress, but resistance to rest, joy, and self-compassion. People who feel behind often struggle to be present. Even moments of pleasure feel interrupted by internal calculation. Shouldn't I be doing something else right now? Is this allowed at this stage? Urgency feeds this cycle. It pushes without direction. It demands movement without clarity. The paradox is painful. Move too quickly, and the choice feels misaligned. Move too slowly, and the shame intensifies. This tension creates paralysis. Action feels risky. Inaction feels unforgivable. So the person lives in a state of almost starting, almost deciding, almost arriving. Externally, they may appear calm or capable. Internally, they are running a constant race against an invisible clock. This urgency is not motivation. It is fear masquerading as productivity. The body responds accordingly. Sleep becomes lighter. Rest feels incomplete. The nervous system remains alert, scanning for signs of falling further behind. Relationships are affected too. The person may withdraw, feeling embarrassed by their perceived lack of progress. Or they may over-explain their situation, preemptively defending their worth. Conversations about the future become charged. Simple questions feel like evaluations. Well, meaning curiosity lands as judgment. Resistance forms here, not against growth, but against exposure, against being seen mid-process, against admitting uncertainty in a culture that prizes certainty. The person may resist asking for help, fearing it confirms inadequacy. They may resist committing, fearing the wrong choice will seal their fate. They may resist slowing down, fearing stillness will make the feeling worse. Yet the urgency never resolves itself through force, it only tightens. This chapter exists in that tightness, the space where effort increases but relief does not. Where pressure grows but clarity remains elusive. Because anxiety, shame, and urgency do not push life forward. They compress it. They shrink the present moment until it feels uninhabitable. Understanding this internal conflict is essential, not to eliminate it immediately, but to see it clearly. Because the turning point does not come from running faster. It comes from questioning the clock itself. And that questioning begins when the person realizes that urgency has not brought them peace, only exhaustion. The next chapter explores the quiet moment when this realization begins to surface. The turning point does not arrive with certainty. It does not come as a bold declaration or a sudden sense of clarity. More often, it arrives quietly, in a moment where the urgency pauses just long enough to be noticed. Something stops working. The constant pressure no longer produces movement. The fear no longer sharpens focus. The comparison no longer motivates, it only exhausts. At first, this feels like failure, as if even anxiety has given up. But beneath that fear, a question begins to form, not loud, not confident, just present. What if this idea of progress is incomplete? This question often emerges during moments of stillness that were never planned. Burnout, disappointment, a missed opportunity that was once seen as essential. A conversation where someone else admits they also feel lost. The realization is not that others are ahead or behind. It is that no one is moving on the same path. The person begins to notice something they had ignored before. Many of the people they envied are also unsure. Some are stable but unfulfilled. Some are successful but exhausted. Some followed the timeline perfectly and still feel disconnected. This does not erase longing, but it complicates the narrative. The mind starts to question whether visible milestones are accurate indicators of inner progress, whether speed is the same as direction, whether arriving early means arriving well. This is a destabilizing realization, because the timeline, for all its pressure, offered structure. It provided a sense of order, even if it caused pain. Questioning it creates uncertainty. If there is no universal schedule, then what guides movement? If being behind is not a fact, then what has been driving the fear? For a moment there is emptiness. This is where many people turn back. The discomfort feels too open-ended. The old urgency, though painful, feels familiar. But for some, the questioning continues. They begin to reflect not on where they are relative to others, but on how they feel in their own life. Not how fast things are moving, but whether they are moving towards something meaningful. This shift is subtle. It does not immediately change circumstances, but it changes orientation. The person notices that much of their distress came from trying to meet expectations that were never truly theirs. Goals chosen to relieve pressure, not to express values. Paths pursued to avoid shame, not to create alignment. This realization is often accompanied by grief, not dramatic grief, but quiet mourning, for the years spent rushing, for the energy spent measuring, for the gentler curiosity that was postponed. Grief and relief coexist here. Relief comes from recognizing that nothing has been missed in an absolute sense. That development cannot be reduced to age or sequence. That understanding, depth, and self-awareness do not follow a schedule. The person may not yet know what forward movement looks like, but they know what it no longer looks like. Progress is no longer defined solely by speed. Success is no longer measured only by visibility. Worth is no longer fully outsourced to comparison. This moment does not end the feeling of being behind, but it softens its authority. The clock loses some of its power, the urgency loosens its grip. The person realizes that catching up was never the real task. The real task was learning how to move in a way that felt honest. And from this realization, something new becomes possible, not a sudden leap forward, but a different relationship with time itself. The next chapter explores how this shift begins to integrate, how forward movement can be redefined without forcing optimism or erasing doubt. Healing does not announce itself. It does not arrive as confidence or certainty. More often, it appears as a quiet permission to move differently than before. After the timeline is questioned, after urgency loosens its grip, there is a delicate phase that follows. This is not resolution, it is recalibration. The person begins to notice how deeply speed had shaped their inner life. How every decision was filtered through urgency. How rest felt undeserved unless it was productive. How stillness triggered guilt instead of peace. Integration begins with awareness of these patterns, not to eliminate them, but to understand them. The body often leads this process before the mind does. Fatigue becomes more noticeable. Overwhelm surfaces more quickly. The nervous system, long accustomed to pressure, begins to resist constant acceleration. This resistance is not laziness, it is information. The person starts responding differently to it. Instead of pushing harder, they pause longer. Instead of forcing motivation, they allow curiosity. Instead of demanding clarity, they tolerate ambiguity. This is uncomfortable. Without the familiar pressure, identity can feel thin. Who are they if they are not catching up? Who are they without the internal race? Healing here is not about replacing urgency with positivity. It is about building tolerance for a slower, quieter form of movement. Gradually, attention shifts inward, not in a self-absorbed way, but in a grounding one. The person begins asking gentler questions, not "how far behind am I?" but "what feels sustainable? What feels aligned? What drains me without returning meaning?" These questions do not always produce immediate answers, but they change direction. Small choices begin to reflect this shift. Commitments are evaluated more carefully. Comparison is noticed sooner and indulged less. Success is redefined privately rather than inherited publicly. Importantly, this phase does not erase ambition. It refines it. Goals become less about proof and more about coherence. Effort is no longer driven solely by fear of falling behind, but by a desire to build something that can be lived inside. There are setbacks. Old comparisons resurface. Moments of panic return unexpectedly. Healing is not linear, but the relationship to these moments changes. Instead of interpreting anxiety as evidence of failure, it is recognized as residue, a learned response from years of pressure. The person learns to let it pass without immediately obeying it. Over time, a new internal rhythm forms, one that honors energy rather than ignores it, one that values depth over speed, one that allows progress to be quiet. This rhythm does not make life simpler, but it makes it more inhabitable. The sense of being behind may still appear, but it no longer defines identity. It becomes a feeling, not a verdict. Integration means holding both truth and tenderness, acknowledging that time has passed, and also recognizing that meaning is not diminished by delay. The person does not arrive at peace, they arrive at permission. Permission to grow without an audience, permission to take longer, permission to build a life that does not need to explain its pace. And in that permission, something subtle stabilizes. The ground no longer feels like it is constantly moving. Time becomes less of an enemy. Movement becomes less frantic. Healing here is not about catching up. It is about finally walking at a pace that allows the self to stay present. The final chapter will reflect on what remains, the quiet understanding that emerges when life is no longer measured against an imaginary clock. There comes a moment when the language of behind begins to lose its authority. Not because everything has been resolved, not because life suddenly aligns with expectation, but because the comparison quietly dissolves. Time once experienced as a threat starts to feel less personal, less accusatory, less like a countdown and more like a landscape. In this final stage, the person no longer tries to correct their life's tempo. They listen to it. They notice how time behaves differently when it is not constantly measured. Hours stretch when attention is present. Days feel fuller when they are not evaluated. Moments gain weight when they are not rushed past. The old narrative, "I should be further by now," still echoes occasionally, but it no longer feels like truth. It feels like memory. A memory shaped by a culture that equates speed with worth. By timelines designed for averages, not individuals. By stories that rarely show the invisible years, the quiet building, the internal reorganizing, the long pauses between visible change. What emerges instead is a deeper understanding. Life does not move in straight lines. It spirals. It revisits. It returns to old questions with new awareness. Being behind was never a factual position. It was a psychological state born from comparison, reinforced by urgency and sustained by fear. And fear, when examined gently, loses its grip. The person begins to see how much growth occurred during the years they once dismissed as stagnant. How resilience formed in silence. How discernment sharpened through waiting. How identity clarified through not knowing. There is a quiet grief here for the time spent believing they were late to their own life, for the pressure carried unnecessarily, for the joy postponed. This grief is not heavy. It is clean. It moves through without demanding correction. In its place, a calmer awareness settles. A recognition that life is not a race with a finish line, but a relationship with time itself. And relationships, by nature, require listening. The person no longer needs to justify their pace. They no longer scan others' lives for proof of inadequacy. They no longer assume that delay equals failure. Instead, there is presence. Presence with where they are, with what they have built so far, with what still remains open. They understand now that some paths take longer because they go deeper, that some seasons appear empty because they are preparing space. That some lives unfold quietly, not because they lack meaning, but because their meaning is internal. Time, once feared, becomes a companion, not always gentle, but no longer hostile. The clock still moves forward, but it no longer defines direction. What remains at the end of this realization is not certainty, but trust. Trust that growth does not expire, that meaning does not diminish with age, that fulfillment does not arrive on schedule, and most importantly, trust that life cannot be missed. Not truly, because life is not something that happens ahead. It is something that happens where attention rests. When urgency fades, attention returns. When attention returns, life becomes visible again. And in that visibility, the person realizes something quietly profound. They were never behind, they were becoming. At their own pace, in their own time.